Welcome to Moral Side of the News. We're glad you're alongside this weekend. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. With me, as always, is a distinguished panel: Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, Centenary United Methodist Church, New Albany; Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School; Reverend Clay Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition; and Father Bill Hammer, St. Margaret Mary and St. William Catholic Churches. It's with a heavy heart we begin today's show with the horrifying mass shooting at a Texas elementary school. As you know, at least 19 children and 2 teachers are dead after an 18-year-old walked into Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, with 2 assault rifles. President Biden, along with a chorus of others, say it's time for lawmakers, quote, to act, end quote. Turning to our panel on Moral Side of the News. Panel, there are no words.
Well, yeah, there's no words, no excuses. Let's say that. But there are many words that can be spoken on this incident. This is a trend, a reoccurring trend. We don't know when it will happen, and we don't know where it will happen. We know that it surely will happen again. And that's the horror of this reoccurring trend that is affecting a lot of innocent people, but these children continue to be caught in the crosshairs of these horrible mass shootings that our current gun laws allow in many ways to reoccur. We talk about hurt thoughts and prayers, and that's the mantra that we hear. But there's legislation that has been posed on the national level that has been approved by Congress, but sitting on the desk of Mitch McConnell, of not moving forward on at least very minimal common sense background checks for guns, and they do nothing. I mean, there's absolutely nothing. Just sit back and watch it as if it's nothing, and they do nothing. So I think there's a lot of words to be spoken. I think they had a press conference there in Texas, at the town in Texas, and Beto O'Rourke, he blurted forth and interrupted the platitudes at that press conference and dared to interrupt their routine, predictable response by challenging them to do something, and that we indeed need to do something and break free from the grips of the strong gun lobbies that has silenced most of the Republican officials who stand in the way of blocking common sense gun legislation and regulation. So something needs to be done, and needs to be pointed squarely in the face of those that can control the regulations affecting gun possession. This boy was only a few days older than 17 who did the shooting. He was legally buy an assault weapon. Now, how bizarre is that? So, I mean, America clearly is doing something wrong, and only in America is this occurring. We need to look at the rest of the world to see what they're doing right, so that we can do something different to make it right here in America.
It doesn't make any sense. And Beto O'Rourke, for his courage, I saw the clip on television, and the governmental leaders at the table simply cussed him out. I haven't heard people being cussed out on live TV in a long time, but it's the nonsense. It's, I never thought I would question the phrase thoughts and prayers. But the way it's used over and over again, and in many situations, just make it into something totally trite and meaningless, which I've never thought that it was. And I'm tired of politicians leading by what they think the poll numbers are. Where's the courage? Is there any courage anymore? It's just, it makes no sense to me whatsoever. And on top of everything, You know what's going to happen this weekend in addition to the Crusade for Children? The National Convention of the National Rifle Association, the NRA. And where is the NRA meeting this year? About 200 miles east of Uvalde, Texas, in Houston. And if I was someone from Uvalde who witnessed that horror this week, I would be, really quite angry that that group was meeting in my state.
Yeah,
You
echoing
mentioned-
again some of what's already been said. Oops, sorry, Harriet. Yeah,
No,
just
go-
echoing some of what's already been said. I've never thought of prayers or thoughts as a platitude, but I think it has been denigrated by some people. It's just let's get my thoughts and prayers. I would never denigrate the value of prayer, ever. But at the same time, meaningful prayer. Prayer is for conversion. Prayer is for change. Prayer is for healing. And I don't see those effects coming from many people who are out there using what for them has become a platitude. It's action. It's called for. And I was not aware of where the NRA convention was going to be coming up soon. I did just see a news story that a major entertainer today announced that he was canceling participating in the convention. And so again, somebody says, I don't want to be in the midst of this organization with his positions at this time. And I do think, as again, people of faith, we all share a very strong prophetic tradition as people of faith. I think that's what's being called for now as prophets, to stand up. Prophets always had a tradition of standing up to the people in power and holding them accountable for the covenant that we all have with God, to care for one another, to love our neighbor and be responsible for what happens to other people. And particularly if rulers aren't taking care of the needy, rulers aren't taking care of those who are most being impacted, then we need to hold them accountable. And as people of faith, that's what we're called to do, is hold people accountable as well. Harry?
Well, we can certainly do that come November in every election, right? That's one way that we can speak out in addition to our prayers. What I want to go back to, Stan, a comment you made about the courage that was shown by the senator who spoke at the press conference. Not only does there need to be a courageous voice speaking up, but there also needs to be the moral conversation that happens, that if we put into act these laws, then what will be the effect of those laws on lives? What Pandora's box does that gun law open up? I think I am most stunned that this 18-year-old could legally buy assault weapons before he can legally buy a beer. An assault weapon? Are you kidding me? Now, if he wants to buy a gun to hunt a deer, that's a whole different story, but assault weapons. What is and then there's that hard conversation we need to have as Americans of our love for and our idolizing of gun power. What is that about? Is it born out of fear because we feel like we have to protect ourselves? Or is it born out of wanting power and authority in that show of metal? There are so many layers to this onion, and that onion has brought a flood of tears. But on a little bit lighter side, very quick story, Mother Teresa traveling about, comes to a border stop, and she's told by the guard she has to be searched, she and her sisters. And the young man's very embarrassed to do that. And he says, "Sister, I'll just ask you, do you have any weapons with you?" And she said, "Oh, yes." "What do you have with you?" "Well, I have my prayer book. It is the mightiest weapon of all." And I'm grateful that that story came to memory today as we think about how trite prayers and thoughts have been made.
And prayer usually and should result in some action in some way. And prayer has been probably one of the most misunderstood realities in our world. But prayer always involves action. When you get up off your knees, you don't have to do something. You're expecting God to help you do something. So prayer is always in order. The Bible says in Philippians to be anxious but nothing, but pray about everything. So it's worth praying about, but it's also engaging in the action that prayer informs us to do. It is, and in the faith community, we need to put ourselves in harm's way. I mean, prophets, we mistake who a prophet is. A prophet is somebody who tells the truth, who's a truth teller. So just say it like it is. Just tell the truth, and be courageous in saying the truth. Nothing's more courageous than having the courage to say the truth in your immediate circle. You don't have to say it in the public square. Just say it in your house, at your kitchen table. Just say it in your circle of friends. Just say it at the barbershop, at the beauty shop. Just let the redeemed of the Lord say so. So just take a stand and don't be silent when you hear this nauseating nonsense about Second Amendment. Well, the Second Amendment is number 2 for a reason. It's not number 1. So that ought to frame the priority of what the Second Amendment is. It is not number 1. There's a law higher than number 2, even within our court system. But there's a law higher than that by God about preserving life and protecting life. That is the highest law that we as believers need to personify and demand. So and then causing these little ones to stumble. Oh, you're talking about something that will make Jesus's blood boil. The blood of Jesus boil is when these little ones are harmed by this monstrous gun law that this society worships, and the silence, the nauseating silence of the Mitch McConnells of the world that leave that legislation on their desk for years and don't take action on simple, common sense gun law. We're not talking about anything that's liberal, so-called liberal. We're not talking about anything that's progressive. We're talking about just simple, common sense gun law regulation. Just do that minimum. That's a minimum requirement. But they do nothing and continue to be sent back to office to do nothing. So I think it rests on those that send the electorate there to do nothing and that are silent. But we, as a faith community, need to speak up and speak out within the circle of influence that we have.
I mean, just background checks. Just make sure that the person who is purchasing the gun won't be purchasing it, we think, to do harm against other creatures, other people.
Well, also, a lot of our rights are naturally restricted and limited, like freedom of the press. That's an important right we have in our country. That doesn't mean you can go out and libel in the press. I mean, the press has some restrictions on it. You know, we say freedom of religion, but there are some religious practices that we have determined are not permitted, like polygamy or some religious practices involving use of drugs or whatever that may be. Some religions claim that that's part of my religious practice, and we limit that. So it's not like just because there's a right, it can't be restricted in some way because we recognize this particular exercising of that right is not good for either the individual or good for society or good for the world.
Yeah, Dr. King just routinely says, I cannot legislate you loving me, but I can legislate you harming me. So I can't make you like me through some law because of some law, but I can stop you from killing me through legislation. So we can do that. We regulate so many other things, and the pharmaceutical industry, every other industry has regulations that protect life. That's the responsibility. The key word is responsibility. And that is the singular responsibility of the government to regulate. Nobody can regulate but the government. So when they don't do what they are supposed to do, what even the Second Amendment says at the very outset of that amendment, well regulated. But don't regulate, you're not doing what you are elected to do. That's regulate. Only you can regulate. So do what you have been elected to do, and that's regulate. So the electorate needs to demand that, but sometimes we need to move beyond our comfort zone to make those demands. I applaud Beto O'Rourke going to that press conference and disrupting it, and even at the expense of being called out by the mayor of that city. But somebody has to take a stand at great risk to get louder and louder. Those children's voices cannot be heard. They were silenced. So someone has to speak out on their behalf, and for future children, that they won't be victims again of this horrible trend that continues to reoccur in this society.
All right, panel. Thank you. We're about halfway through our program moral side of the news this week, and we'll continue to talk about children, in this case, babies. Kentucky is among the states with one of the highest out-of-stock rates for baby formula. Families are scrambling to find ways to feed their infants. A U.S. military plane carrying more than 70,000 pounds of baby formula arrived in Indianapolis last weekend from Germany. A second shipment is now on the way. So turning to our panel, I, for one, was surprised and stunned that a shortage like this could happen in our country. Your thoughts?
Where was their plan B? Where was Abbott's plan B when they shut down the plant in November and this shortage started to escalate, not only because of their plant, but because of supply chain shortages and all the rest of that? I hold them morally responsible for not having a plan B in place, knowing that their product is not I think I'll go buy that, but their product is I must have that to feed my child. And then the other moral dilemma for me in this is, where were they in taking care of their plant in the beginning so that it wouldn't have to be shut down because it was not sanitary? Are you kidding me? That is their job. And where was the regulation, the accountability, and the responsibility on the Abbott company? That's in this country, that's just not.
I think we're so arrogant. We're so smug. We have everything. We can solve everything. There are no problems here. And if the one thing that the pandemic has taught us more than once is we don't have the control. No human being, no country, no factory has that control. We need to begin to simply work together. We need to strategize and plan for what we have come to realize is quite an uncertain future.
Yeah, and the whole recalling process is not just limited to baby formula. Going back to Harriet's point, I think we have, like in the meat processing area, and then those plants were shut down, and in part because of sanitary issues. Think of the various, recalls that are happening. I think I remember just reading recently about a peanut butter recall. I mean, there is something to be said that, at least from an outside perspective, I don't work in those plants. I'm not management in those plants. I don't know what resource they ever don't have available, but why isn't it a high priority to keep our processing facilities focused on cleanliness, keeping up with maintaining the sanitary type of conditions? Now, let me say thank God that when contaminations happen, those are at least announced, as opposed to, just pretend they never happen and we'll just let it play itself out. So I'm grateful that those formulas that were causing children to get sick were recalled. But I think I'm agreeing very much with her, saying, why wasn't a priority to get that plant open immediately? It closed in November, and here we are in May, and they're planning now to reopen it in another month or two. why it wasn't reopened in January, February, making it a priority. So that's frustrating. And again, it's not just in this particular component of the food processing industry. It's felt elsewhere, but this is the immediate one. And again, you can go without peanut butter, you can go without, other forms of meat like beef. But yes, these children cannot go without the formula that they need.
Well, I mean, there's a lot here. I don't know enough about the details and particulars. I understand there was some sanitary issues, and the concern is not only closing the plant but reopening the plant. But I just stepped back a bit and I just opened my Bible and I just thought about how has human babies been fed over the ages. I mean, formula is a relatively new phenomenon in human history. I don't recall when I was growing up having a formula. Maybe my children were formulas in the last maybe 40 or so years, 50 maybe. But my 94-year-old mother, she never had formula. My pastor's grandfather, 90 plus years, he never was raised on formula. Methuselah lived as long as we know he lived, as long as he never had formula. Moses never had formula. So God had a formula for children, and it was called mama. And somehow, over the ages, with the exception of this slither of time, babies have been born, and lives have continued without man-made formula. So it's a man-made, even though there's some advantages clearly to the formula, but it's a man-made product that we've suddenly become dependent upon when man has survived most of man's history without it. I think that is where we need to look, and for us, the country, to be held hostage by one company's neglect, if you will, it is a bad place to be, to have one private enterprise company have so much power and influence that if it malfunctions in any way, it's going to suddenly create a crisis in America. America should never have been put in that position in the first place. So I think we need to look outside the borders of just what one company can do or not do to impact the lives of so many.
A lot of it is not just generic formula, it's special needs formula. Those who have a milk allergy.
Yeah, right.
And therefore, that's the crisis. So it's not just the human milk can substitute for these children, because they would have an allergic reaction to human milk as well.
Being the mother of an adopted child, formula was the only way for me to feed my baby. And not only that, but she had those high sensitivities. And so when the stores were out, even then, it was a scary time. But I agree, Bill, on and Clay, one company being the only one that WIC can use. What kind of monopoly is that? That's
a monopoly. I think we busted that up back in the Gilded Age. I think Teddy Roosevelt challenged that. So no one should have a monopoly on anything at any time. That's what the free enterprise system is designed to guarantee. And I think the ball was dropped. Again, it's another occasion where regulation, it works for the citizens to protect them against crises like this that are man-made that could be prevented.
If the monopolies and so on, if memory serves me, we took care of them around the same time, well over a century ago, that the Pure Food and Drug Act was passed. And the idea that if a factory, a facility that makes infant formula is shut down because of cleanliness and sanitary reasons, whatever happened to inspections by the government to make sure that the plant was clean and pure? There's so many questions.
All right, panel, we've got a couple of minutes left. I want to end on a celebratory note. What a week for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Louisville's own Justin Thomas captured golf's PGA championship. And here's the better story. Maybe 20-year-old construction worker Noah Thompson from small town Louisa, Kentucky, was crowned this year's American Idol on ABC. Thompson said he led a simple life before his friends signed him up for the singing competition. Panel, simple life no more for Noah Thompson. Your thoughts on that?
No, I don't know. I wasn't aware of the Noah Thompson. Heard about the golf pro, applaud him for golf. Louisville has always produced unique greatness. So, and coming from a small town, of course, that just catapults him into another arena. So it's always good to get a good story like that, So that's good to know and encouraging all the so-called little guys to keep on going up that hill like a little Shane that could.
I wish
It's always
him
good to hear
well.
positive news from the Commonwealth.
Yeah, and wish him well and those who support him, and the story that he is, small town person just doing his life, and this great thing happens.
Mm-hmm.
Fairy tale.
Right.
It is. And again, it's an encouragement again to our very young people, to let the kindergartners, let the first grade, let the fourth graders know, these people were in class just like you and weren't sure what their future was going to be, but they were open to it. And look what these opportunities present themselves, and learn that. And that's still an ongoing thing for us adults.
Right.
Regularly in situations we don't anticipate, and you're given a chance to respond or step up. And these kind of guys inspire us all, I think.
All right. I guess we're all kind of glad we gave up that singing back in grade school, huh?
Yeah. Well, hey.
Thank you, panel, to Reverend
Yeah, I was going to
Harriett
say, just one
Akins-Banman.
real quick follow-up, John. Yeah, I was going to say, I was moved from the singing birds to the listening birds.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't real good at that. Here we are today. Right. Thank you, Harriett Akins-Banman, Stan Miles, Clay Calloway, Bill Hammer. If you'd like to catch this program again, just jump on YouTube and search for Moral Side of the News. Until next week, thank you, panel, and have a great week. We'll see you again.
Okay.
Seems like a cliche. People have been saying it about the pandemic. We're all in this together. Well, the crusade is something that we've all been in together for many, many years.
And these amazing machines that saved her life, I just remember seeing WHAS Crusade for Children.
For those of you who contribute to the crusade, just want to personally say thank you. It's helped so many families just like mine. We wouldn't be here without you.
The 69th annual WHAS Crusade for Children begins Saturday at 1 o'clock on WHAS 11 and 840 WHAS Radio. You can watch the tote board climb all weekend long. We'll announce the grand total just before 7 o'clock on Sunday. You can get involved right now. Just go to WHAScrusade.org. That's WHAScrusade.org and make a secure online donation, and see the many new ways you can help change a child's life. You can also mail your donation to WHAS Crusade for Children, 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky, 40202. That's 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky, 40202.
We are able to have a large number of children in our care with disabilities. Those few dollars that you put in or somebody else puts in makes a big difference for these kids, and that's what it's all about.
Knowing that the Crusade for Children and all the people that have given money for that is going straight to these people is really humbling. To know that they're making a difference in my family, it's really rewarding.
We could not do what we do for children without the generosity of the Crusade.
Thanks for changing a child's life through the WHAS Crusade for Children. And please plan to join us next weekend for the 69th annual crusade.